Preub, profesor de Economía y Sociología del Deporte en Johannes Gutenberg, Universidad de Mainz. También se encuentra con nosotros para hablar sobre el tema Patrocinio Deportivo, Adecuacion y Funcion, el profesor Masterman, director de la Facultad de Ciencias del Deporte de Nutria, Universidad de Newcastle. En primer término, dirigirá su mensaje el señor vicedecano, profesor doctor Miguel Ángel Vicente.
Bueno, buenas tardes, gracias por participar de esta actividad. Agradecer a Gerardo Bielons, que es un argentino que vive en España, con el cual tenemos un vínculo muy estrecho y estamos tratando de avanzar en actividades con la Universidad Autonoma de Madrid. Gracias a la gestión de Gerardo, contamos con el profesor Holger Preub de Alemania y con el profesor Masterman de Inglaterra. Yo quería contarles algunas intimidades muy rápidamente de este evento para que ustedes conozcan un poquito cómo funciona. Sé que hay alumnos, que hay docentes, que queda alguna gente que vino de afuera. Por ejemplo, está Daniel Fernández, que es el gerente de estadio y de eventos del club más importante de Argentina, de River Plate. Pero bueno, también están los profesores Rubén Barmat, está Aldo Alvarelos. Y me parece que es importante que conozcan algunas intimidades. Para nosotros es muy importante que es el tercer año consecutivo que hacemos el Congreso Internacional de Economía y Gestión. En una universidad como esta es muy difícil poder garantizar y poder dar regularidad a este tipo de eventos. La verdad que estamos muy contentos, cada año tenemos mayor cantidad de actividades, cada año tenemos invitados de mayor prestigio. Para que tengan una idea del volumen que significa manejar un evento de este tipo en una universidad como esta, y Daniel me va a comprender porque hicimos juntos muchas cosas en River, tenemos simultáneamente durante todo el día 30 y pico de conferencias. Ayer tuvimos 17. De aquí al viernes en total vamos a manejar 120 actividades. La verdad que todo esto se hace a pulmón, con esfuerzo, sin presupuesto. Seguramente ustedes verán en los diarios, en los medios, muchos eventos de este tipo. Congresos, jornadas, medias jornadas, pero absolutamente todas son con arancel. Esto es gratuito. Para la Universidad de Buenos Aires, hacer 4 días de actividades, 100 y pico de conferencias, la mayoría con invitados de muy alto nivel, tanto del exterior como de aquí, y hacer una oferta gratuita para que venga el que quiera, la verdad que es un esfuerzo muy importante y poder hacerlo nos pone muy contentos. Esto lo hacemos con un subsidio que da el Ministerio de Educación. No cobramos aranceles, no pedimos sponsors, patrocinadores, lo hacemos todo a pulmón. Y la verdad que se puede hacer por la generosidad que tienen personas como los 3 expositores, a quienes quiero agradecer porque realmente ninguno de ellos cobra honorarios. Ustedes piensen que hay gente que se movió de Alemania, de Inglaterra, de España, y no están cobrando un solo peso de honorarios. O sea, la facultad lo único que paga es el pasaje en avión en clase turista y el hotel, nada más. Cualquier otro gasto extra lo pagan ellos. Así que yo realmente les quiero agradecer porque esto no es frecuente y para la universidad pública es muy importante. Así que bueno, gracias a todos, sé que lo van a disfrutar y nos vemos al cierre de la actividad. Muchas gracias.
Habló para todos nosotros el señor vicedecano, profesor doctor Miguel Ángel Vicente. A continuación tiene la palabra el profesor Gerardo Bielons.
Buenas tardes para todos, bienvenidos. Y fundamentalmente quiero agradecer a los organizadores del evento, del congreso, a Miguel Ángel, otra persona, no sé si está por aquí, Humberto también, porque en este transcurso de aproximadamente 3 meses han sido muchos los mails, los llamados telefónicos para poder concretar la cita esta con este bloque tan interesante y yo diría apasionante y de desarrollo que puede tener lo que es el mundo de la gestión del deporte. Escucharán mi acento que es de aquí, aunque dice la Universidad de Madrid, pero ya hace casi 19 años que resido ininterrumpidamente en esa ciudad, pero bueno, con las vistas conocidas, familiares y profesionales que uno hace al país 1 o 2 veces por año. Y es un verdadero placer estar con Masterman y con Holger Preub, colegas, y decirles que excelentes profesionales de la universidad y fundamentalmente investigadores. Les comentaba recién que muchos de los profesores que dan clase en esta universidad y en otras quizás no tienen honorarios y ellos tienen prácticamente asignada su jornada casi completa en sus respectivas universidades, con los presupuestos europeos, con lo cual le permite a cada uno de ellos, y con subvenciones importantes, hacer las investigaciones correspondientes. Yo sé quizás que cuando hagan las presentaciones ellos, a mí me toca una conferencia posterior, después a las 7 de la tarde, sobre recursos humanos, especialmente en eventos deportivos, que prima el tema económico, y soy de esta ciudad, de este país, y conozco las diferencias que hay, pero quisiera que tomen en cuenta por dónde van los caminos de la investigación, por dónde van los caminos de la gestión, y que el deporte, como la pasada semana en Madrid decía un profesor holandés que invité, que no era solamente hacer ejercicio, hacer deporte, sino que había que organizarlo muy bien. Con lo cual he titulado yo personalmente el bloque El punto de encuentro de la ciencia y los negocios en la industria del deporte. Cómo estos dos ámbitos se juntan, muchas veces de la parte académica de investigación y de la parte profesional, que es lo que realmente pasa hoy en día en estos dos campos. Yo tengo la suerte de estar al mismo tiempo en la Universidad Autónoma de Madrid como profesor y de tener mi empresa dedicada a la organización de eventos deportivos, con lo cual, como digo a mis alumnos, tengo una visión académica y una versión profesional, porque he trabajado directamente en eventos deportivos importantes, fundamentalmente el Master Series Madrid, y me permite tener una visión muy, pero muy profunda. Quizás mi campo no es mucho el de la investigación, ni las cantidades de publicaciones que tiene Holger o Guy Masterman con la publicación de sus libros, que están abocados a esas temáticas, pero sí decirles, si estando en un ambiente académico como es en la Universidad de Buenos Aires, en esta facultad, lo que ven ahí en inglés, que yo lo titulé Sport Management, que es gestión del deporte, los estudios de gestión del deporte en Europa, en Estados Unidos, en Australia, en Nueva Zelanda, son estudios de grado. Existen programas especiales en las universidades donde los alumnos estudian 4 años para ser gestores del deporte. No tiene nada que ver esto con estar en el mundo de la didáctica, del deporte o de la educación física, del entrenamiento, de la salud, de deporte para discapacitados. Ellos estudian para estar en ese mundo. ¿Y dónde se perfilan esos alumnos? Porque tengo la suerte de estar en Madrid y ser invitado a distintas universidades de Europa y conocer estos estudios. Estos futuros sport managers o gestores deportivos terminan trabajando en federaciones, en clubes de fútbol, en organización de eventos, en políticas deportivas de los municipios en cada una de las ciudades y regiones de Europa, y muchos de ellos también toman la iniciativa empresarial. Para eso también la sociedad tiene la concepción de que se necesitan de estos profesionales, y necesitar de estos profesionales quiere decir que los alumnos que terminan estos estudios, algunos están especializados en los temas de marketing deportivo, en media, comunicación, la parte de logística, la parte de recursos humanos o la parte también tan importante del patrocinio deportivo. Esos estudios también culminan con los Masters en Sport Management, que casi son obligatorios para estos alumnos, y a partir del 2010 con lo que va a ser el espacio de educación superior europea, donde uno va a poder empezar a estudiar en un país de Europa y poder terminar en otro. Con esa homogeneización que va a haber, van a tener la posibilidad de estar en ámbitos totalmente distintos y con la posibilidad de desarrollar ahí su carrera profesional. Nos conocemos también con ellos de lo que se llama la ESM. Recomiendo que tomen nota, que es la página web, que es la European Association for Sport Management, que es una asociación donde todos los meses de septiembre se hace el Congreso Europeo y donde los trabajos científicos tienen un impacto altísimo, altísimo, porque tanto ellos dos como muchos profesores de Europa investigan y presentan sus comunicaciones correspondientes en estos congresos. Y uno dice, ¿y esto es deporte? Esto es deporte investigado, esto es deporte con trabajo de campo, y estas son informaciones que pueden valer muchísimo para todos los profesionales del campo. Este año el Congreso, para que tengan ustedes la idea, la dimensión de lo que es, el año pasado fue en Heidelberg. El profesor Holger ha sido el director del comité científico, con cantidad de comunicaciones para releer. rever con sus correspondientes coordinadores. Este año en septiembre el congreso se hace en el estadio de fútbol del Ajax de Holanda, que me imagino alguna vez no hace falta ser del mundo del fútbol para saber lo que corresponde a este estadio cubierto. Ahí va a ser el congreso. El año que viene es en Praga y tengo el honor de decir que con una presentación que he realizado yo hace 2 meses en Ámsterdam, he ganado la candidatura para que ese congreso se haga en el 2011 en Madrid, con lo cual, como habla hispana, dejo las puertas abiertas en el futuro para que puedan entrar en esta asociación, donde uno también puede estar asociado y tener muchísima información al respecto. Esto quiere decir que el trabajo en el mundo del deporte avanza muchísimo, las publicaciones, el impacto que dejan los eventos en las ciudades. Tengo la suerte de estar en Madrid. Madrid es candidata como ciudad olímpica junto con Río de Janeiro, con Tokio, con Chicago. Desde mi empresa estamos como patrocinadores colaboradores en lo que es la candidatura de Madrid 2016. Y exactamente hace 3 semanas vino una comisión, que es la comisión del Comité Olímpico Internacional, a ver la ciudad. Porque esto, la palabra en inglés, que muy bien lo trabajan también Guy, lo que son los bidding, cuando uno presenta una candidatura para organizar un mundial, unos Juegos Olímpicos, tiene que tener preparado pero muchísima infraestructura de la ciudad. Tiene que estar preparado, evidentemente, tema de hotelería, instalaciones, la ecología. El jueves pasado, antes de subir el avión aquí para Buenos Aires, estuve escuchando una conferencia interesantísima de lo que es la sostenibilidad en los eventos, el cuidado ecológico que eso representa, con lo cual quiere decir que todo este tipo de estudios son determinantes y evidentemente representan un negocio para las ciudades, pero las ciudades deben estar preparadas y deben estar lo más presentables para cuando esta comisión, como hace 3 semanas estuvo en Madrid, o cuando todos los futuros turistas puedan llegar a estar. Para vuestra información, el 2 de octubre en Copenhague, en Dinamarca, se determina qué ciudad va a albergar los Juegos Olímpicos del 2016. A decir verdad, y ya que a pesar que vivo en Madrid, creo que será muy difícil que pueda tenerlo Madrid, porque 2012 es en Europa y generalmente se cambia de continente, aunque toda la comisión de Madrid 2006, que está trabajando hace 1 año y medio muy intensamente con apoyo del máximo organismo que es el Consejo Superior de Deportes, tienen pensado que quizás cambiando de lo que es el habla, haciendo un habla antes ha sido en China, después va a un habla inglesa y de un habla española, pueda llegar a albergar esos juegos. Pero para eso también hay estudios. Holger hace una presentación específica del impacto que dejan unos Juegos Olímpicos en una ciudad, el impacto económico, el impacto social y todos los estudios que él viene realizando al respecto. Con lo cual, yo dejo a ellos dos ahora como especialistas en cada una de sus 2 ponencias. Espero que puedan entender su inglés, si no va a tener la traducción simultánea, y vamos a manejar algunos tiempos de una presentación de unos 40 a 45 minutos y manejar un tiempo de preguntas entre 10 y 15 minutos para estar un poco organizados. Bienvenidos a todos. Me olvidé de presentarlo a Holger. Es profesor de la, como ha dicho muy bien antes, creo que es Noemí, de la Johannes Gutenberg University of Mainz en Alemania. Pueden entrar a su web y simplemente sorprenderse con la cantidad de publicaciones y trabajos que tiene realizados. Colega, amigo, una persona súper agradable, entrañable, con lo cual espero que puedan disfrutar con su presentación.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this university and to Argentina. Thank you very much for you coming here and trying to listen to someone who will do his best to confuse you in the next 40 minutes. As you see here, my presentation will be about lessons learned on evaluating the economic impact of mega sport events. The economic impact of mega sport events like the Olympics in Buenos Aires, there was a bid for 2004 as you know, the mega sport event, the Football World Cup in Brazil, for example, in 2014, or in South Africa 2010, and so on. I did some studies on mega sport events, on Athens, on Beijing, on the Football World Cup in Germany, the Hockey World Cup in Germany, the Euro 2008 in Austria, and so on and so forth. And by doing this kind of studies again and again, I learned that it is very complicated and it is different from games to games, from event to event. What I want to present to you today is some general information which can be adapted to each kind of event, even smaller events, even cultural events, so big concerts, or mega sport events. This is directly related to sport management, because there is a big controversy among those managing or wanting the event. On one hand, we have the boosters. As you see here, the boosters try to attract autonomous money. Autonomous money is money which is not from the region, it comes from outside the region, and increases additional tax, or brings additional tax, jobs and additional income to the population. So it is interesting to have an event to attract money that would not have come to Argentina or to Buenos Aires without the event. The second point is that there is accelerated construction and modernization of the city. So Olympic Games, for example, would bring you new streets, new infrastructure, new stadiums, a new hospital, maybe a new airport, and so on and so forth, even if it costs certainly a lot of money, but the boosters like to see the positive effects. And third, there is an incredible image effect. So people all over the world look, if we have a mega sport event, at a particular city. On the other hand, we have the opponents, and you had certainly many opponents here in Argentina when Buenos Aires was bidding for the games, because some people see there is a great inefficiency of using scarce public resources, and this inefficiency is caused by hasty planning and the establishment of unneeded or non-sustainable infrastructure, as well as the normal stuff like corruption and whatever is related when big events are organized. Why is this discussion important? As people in sport management or as local politicians, we somehow need information. Should Buenos Aires bid for a big event or not? Should Argentina try to get the Football World Cup in 12 or 16 years or not? So should one try to get these events or not? Boosters calculated certainly very positive, but can we believe them? So as decision makers, we need reliable information on event impacts. And that's the research question I would like to follow in the next 40 minutes or 35 minutes. It's about what are the strengths and the weaknesses of impact studies and impact calculations, which we can find so many in the internet and for every event. I put this research question here in the corner that you can always see and be reminded to it. So there are reasons for the different results of impact studies. As I said, some calculated very positive, the opponents calculated very negative. And boosters versus opponents, I call this chart here, and there are 4 reasons for the different results of impact studies. The first is that the perspective of the study is totally different. So for example, someone who is a stakeholder may be against it because he's from the poor society, yes, and others which are very rich may see the games very different. The second point is methodology. There are different methods to evaluate an economic impact study, and some calculate more in than others, and some are not looking at certain points, and I would like to stress this as well. The third point is that many aspects are overlooked. So what about crowding out? I will explain this concept in a minute. What about those persons accompanying those visiting an event? What about intangible effects, or what about long-term costs? Are they really calculated in or not? And the fourth point is the prediction of the data, or is it that many data need to be guessed? So are the data available, or do I need to guess them for my impact study? If I saw these 4 points a little different, the content of my presentation will be: first point, impact analysis. What can be delivered? So how good is our methodology to really measure an economic impact on a mega sport event, or a smaller event, as I said? Second point, everything is relative. It depends on the perspective. I would like to show you that different stakeholders certainly have different perspectives, and therefore it is true that a positive made impact study and a negative made impact study is not one is wrong and one is right. Both can be right. The third point is our methodology precise enough? So do we need to guess too much, or do we have enough data available? The fourth point is about opportunity costs. Sounds easy, but it's very complex. So this argument which you always can hear, oh, 2 billion for Olympic Games, 2 billion euros. This can be invested for hospitals, for streets, and for better things than this mega sport event. And then I come to a very short conclusion. So to remind you where I am, in the other corner I have my content, and we start with the first point, impact analysis. Since we are here at an University of Economics, I would like to start with some broader theoretical thoughts. What means impact analysis? What is the basic requirement if we want to do an impact analysis? The analysis shall measure the total change of the city structure, the city infrastructure, due to the staging of the event. So actually we want to compare the city after the event with the city without the event. So we have 3 cases here. How to identify event-related changes. So what is really changed through the event? We can take the event case. So let's say Buenos Aires gets the Olympic Games in 2028 or something, or later. And then we compare the event case versus the without case. Or we compare the event case with the control case, or we compare the event case with the reference case. I come to this and show you a graph that you can easier follow my thoughts. Here you see the normal development of Buenos Aires, let's say over the time, whatever index we take here. And here we are winning the bid, and here the event takes place. The prediction through the without case would do the following. When we are winning the bid, we look how our city looks like, and then after the event we see what changed, and everything you see here in red are the changes. So we could say without the event we would be like today, with the event we have some changes. But that's certainly wrong, because the city would otherwise also develop. So we can use a control case. The control case looks similar, we just use this point, look at the history and do a trend calculation, and we just say without the event the city would develop like it developed the past 20 years. Then our event impact would be only the small areas here. But that's also not true, because we learn from the economic crisis and so on that it's not so easy to predict a constant development. Maybe it will be quicker, maybe it will not be quicker. So we also could use reference cases. So looking at cities of the similar size and the similar economics than Buenos Aires, we compare 3 cities with Buenos Aires and see if Buenos Aires is different than the other cities. But that would mean, if we would use here the difference in differences approach, that we need 3 other cities as big as Buenos Aires in Argentina. There are none. So this is also not working. So how can we then find out what the economic impact of an event is? I just had a few days ago a discussion with someone from Greece who does a lot of research on the tourism in Greece. And she said, I have so many data collected from the year 2000 until today, and I could easily measure and want to calculate what was the tourism impact of the Athens Olympic Games. But the problem is, how can you compare it with what city can you compare Athens in order to see if there was an impact or not? I can give you a very simple example. Sydney, for example, in the year 2000 was very, very successful with their Olympic Games in terms of advertising for tourism. But then 1 year later, it was 11th of September 2001, there was a big drop down in tourism by 40%. So who can tell us that without the Olympic Games, it wouldn't have been 43% drop down, and they still gained 3% more tourism than without the Olympic Games? So you see, we have a central problem to find a right comparison for an impact analysis. The idea is, and what I did in my studies, is that we are not comparing to a total development. We try to measure bottom up. So we really look at the event and look what impact can be created through the event. The problems to identify event-related changes is still that we have some development unknown without the event, but I come to this in a minute. There are some other problems related to our wish to calculate the economic impact. Many impacts, not only the overall economic impact, are simply too small to be detected. So for example, the change of tourism might be 0.5%, which is a lot for a country, but 0.5% is in the normal white noise, as you see here on point 2. There are too many intervening variables which make the results changing even without the event. Or for example, let's take the Football World Cup. The impact of the Football World Cup was 3.2 billion euros. 3.2 billion euros. It's a big project. It was calculated by us for the federal government of Germany. And this impact was driven only from foreign spectators, 3.2 billion. But what is 3.2 billion if the Germans' economy is 2,300 billion a year? Imagine you have a pot of 2,300 billion, then you drop in 3 billion. This is 0.13% of the GDP, which is, if there's a change of 0.13% of the GDP, there is nothing to see. So the impact in itself is a big impact for the host cities and for Germany, but it is in relation to the economy a very small one, and that explains already why you can find many studies looking from a macro perspective at the economy. They are not finding an impact from a mega sport event in the national economy, while I would say 3.2 billion is not nothing. I mean, it's so much that it still has an impact, but it's small. And the third point is we have many impacts which are intangible. So the upskilling of people, of volunteers, learning a lot of things. The entertainment factor, the feel-good factor, the national pride of the population. The image impact. So Germany is certainly seen now a little different after the World Cup, that we are also people that can celebrate and they're happy and not always serious and in time and business-like and so on. So what are the two methods available? First of all, we have the economic impact analysis, which is very often done. The second is a little better analysis type, is the cost-benefit analysis. The weakness of the economic impact analysis is that the time frame is limited. So often they look only at 4 weeks or 1 year of the economic impact. But what about the debts that have to be paid back the next 20 years? What about the costs a venue is creating the next 20 years? All this is not included. The impact is only measured by the fresh money, so the fresh money into an economy, which means it is the demand side. So how do we stimulate demand, but it is not related to the change of the supply side. So new streets, for example, if you have a new street, you are more productive, people can go quicker to work, they are not so stressed and so on, so you're more productive, but this is not measured in money, which is considered in economic impact analysis. Third point, intangibles are not considered, like the image, the change of location factors, the legacy. And interesting wise, if we have an economic impact study, our measurement is money. But mega sport events are not only there to make money, they certainly have other objectives as well. So it is even more interesting to see, for example, the more people get injured by sport, the more we create economic impact, because we need hospitals, we need ambulances, we need doctors and so on. So we stimulate our activity, the more we have injuries. We stimulate our activity, the more we have debts. So the bigger the stadiums are built in Argentina and the more debts we make, the better it is for the local economy if we look only at the short term, which the economic impact analysis does. So in this 1 year, certainly we spend a lot of money. You borrow from Germany, you spend here, it's positive. In a long term, you have to pay back, and you have to pay back interest and so on. It's negative. But if you look only at this 1 year, it's certainly logic that it looks quite positive. It's a little different with cost-benefit analysis. The weakness here is we calculate no induced effects, and the additional jobs and taxes are often not considered. But the strength is opportunity costs are considered, intangibles, as well as the perspective is clearly formulated. Let's stick a little with the perspective, my next point. Each impact analysis can have only one perspective, and that perspective has to be clearly defined. And this perspective can be here in 3 dimensions. The first is the discipline. We can look at economic impact studies, we can look at cultural impact studies, we can look at environmental impact studies, social impact studies, sport impact studies, and so on. A quick example, if we build a velodrome, this is expensive. This is a venue we don't need for other things after the event. It is very expensive to maintain. So it is a negative economic impact. But from the sport perspective, it is positive, because the cycling federation, they have a new venue. The cyclists can practice world level cycling. Maybe Argentina is winning a gold medal in cycling, so there is happiness in the population, and so on and so forth. So the same thing can have a positive and a negative perspective. The second is the group, the second dimension, who is looking at an impact. So it can be business persons, it can be wealthy citizens, it can be politicians, the poor population, artists, tourists, and so on and so forth. And the third dimension, is it a long-term perspective or a short-term perspective? The long-term includes the change of the supply side. So how is the city changing its location factors? Is it more productive, a better airport, better streets, better image, and so on? Or is it only looked at from a short-term, the consumption, which affects the demand side? Actually, I was a little too quick in my point 1, and my explanation, the fourth dimension is positive and negative. So like I said, from the sport side, it is a negative impact, but from the economic, it can be a positive, or we can have a positive for sport and a negative for sport as well. So if I take these 3 dimensions, I can form this to a perspective cube. I mean, look back, there are here 7, maybe 10 different disciplines, there are 10 different persons. It's 10 times 10 is already 100, times 2 is 200, and 200 times 2 is 400. So it's easily that we have 400 impact studies possible to be done, and they all have different results. So we can use these 3 dimensions as a perspective cube, and one example would be, let's do an impact study, the economic impact of business persons in a long term. Or we can use alternatively a study on the culture and the impact on artists in a short term. So you see, this is very extremely different, and it is not surprising that if you do studies that this can be with very different results. Here's just an idea of, or example of positive and negative effects. I'm not reading it, don't worry. Here are many positive, here are many negative, and I can grab out the tourism area, and there are positive and negative effects. Some quick, I skip this because I said this already. The demand side and the supply side, how this can be seen differently, and come to my next point. So you learned already or heard already there are so many different perspectives, and that's explaining why studies can be made positive and negative. The next point is the methodologies and the often overlooked aspects. So there are difficulties to measure the real impact from an event. And first of all, we have to define the region, the period, how long we look at the event impact, and the perspective. Even if this is clearly defined, we still have 3 central aspects that are often overlooked. And the first is crowding out, the second redistribution, and the third is double counting or missing effects. Let me quickly explain you the crowding out problem with impact studies. Crowding out is a reduction in private consumption or investment that occurs because of an increase in government spending. In other words, we have a demand curve and a supply curve, and here at a given price, the income. If the event comes, the demand curve shifts to the right. We have more demand because it's not only the citizens from Buenos Aires, it's also tourists asking for infrastructure or some goods. So what happens is not that if we have more tourists, we have more income here. Actually, it happens that we will come to a new equilibrium, and therefore we have a certain loss. This is the crowded out money, and this is based on a higher price. So the prices will increase and some people will not buy anymore, and therefore we have a crowding out effect. Let's bring this now, don't worry, I just try, as I said, to confuse you. If we look at impact studies of event visitors, so let's take away the investments and all the other effects, we only look at visitors. We have really different groups of visitors. And the first mistake often done is that impact studies just look how many tickets do we sell. Or 1 million tickets means 1 million spectators. 1 million spectators spend 100 euros a day, so I can calculate how much money the event will make. But that's wrong, because we have different groups. First group is the blue group here. These are our positive impacts. That's the event visitors, extensioners, those who stay longer, and interesting wise, the homestayers. So that are people from Buenos Aires that usually wanted to go abroad, but they stay at home in order to see the mega sport event. But if we are right in our calculation, we have to reduce their impact by the impact of runaways and cancellers. The runaways are residents who leave the city and take a vacation out of the region, an extra vacation. So they bring their money out of Buenos Aires because of the event. They do an extra vacation somewhere else. So the money they would have spent is now brought away. while the homestayers are those usually being away and now spending the money in Buenos Aires. The cancelers are all those that usually wanted to visit Argentina, and because of the big event they avoid to come here. They are often mixed up with other groups here which have basically no real impact. These are, for example, casuals. Someone who is anyhow in Argentina and in Buenos Aires doing a normal vacation, and then, there is an event. I can visit this event, and anyhow, if the event is there or not, I would have spent my money here. Or time switchers, those that would have come at another time, and now they come at another time to Argentina, spend their money today and not in 3 months. So I know that's confusing, but that shows you that we cannot use the figures of spectators or even count the number of visitors as creating an impact. And most impact studies are doing it. They say, okay, if they are serious, they say we don't take the citizens of the city, but we only count the foreigners. But look here, this citizen, the homestayers, have to be counted, while these foreigners, the casuals and time switchers, have not to be counted. And to be precise, we have to count the red groups, which are the crowded out groups. Let's come to the next overlooked aspect. This is related to redistribution, which are the yellow groups we just saw. Redistribution is any change of the decision for consumption or investment in another sector than originally planned due to the staging of the event. I try to make this graphically here. There you see the direct consumption over time. If we have the non-event case, this would be the direct consumption of the non-event case, what normal tourists and the citizens are spending in Buenos Aires. Now we have the, first I have to explain you the colors. Red means imports to the region. So if a normal tourist spends some money here, Buenos Aires needs to import from Brazil and from other countries or from the countryside the red part, while this part is produced in Buenos Aires and creates jobs in Buenos Aires. Now let's go to the event case. It can be that the same money is spent from the yellow groups, the casual, who anyhow was here, but that less is imported. So it's only this imported, and there's more produced here in Buenos Aires. Then we have this additional consumption in the region due to the event. So this would be additional. It can also be vice versa. What makes it even more complicated is if we take out these two blocks here and look at them as induced effects. Induced effects is that the money that is earned in Buenos Aires, so someone selling some food is earning more money from the tourist, and this more money from the tourist, this person is spending again. And there can be also a change that there's more imports to the region or income in the region, and this can be different because the money is spent in different sectors. So to make it with an easy example, if we have no event here, you all go to a movie and spend some money in a movie. So the movie owner is earning money and spends the money at restaurants and so on in Buenos Aires. Alternatively, you can go to this big event, and it's a cultural event, and the artist is earning a lot of money, let's say musician. So you all spend the same money then for the movie, now for the concert. And the actor in the concert is getting most of the money and is taking all this money back to the United States. So then the money you spent, the same 100 pesos you have spent, instead of the cinema you spend for this actor, and the actor is bringing that money to the States. So it's a bigger red area here. The same spending redistribution of your money, you redistribute from cinema to an actor, makes the region losing money. And we had the first and second point here. The third point, which also can happen, is that the citizens of Buenos Aires change their marginal propensity to save or to consume. So that means during the event, that means that you're not saving so much than you usually save, you spend more, there's more consumption, and if you're not saving this up after the event, then this is a positive impact, while if you decide to save later or use some saved money, then there is no economic impact. My last points here concerning methodology is double counting and missing aspects. You see already how complex it is. So in a questionnaire we did with the World Cup visitors, we need to ask them, are you a casual, are you a time switcher, are you here only for the event, how many people did you bring with you, are they also visiting the event, the money you spent here, where have you taken it from, was it saved money, and so on. So it's a very complex questionnaire to get the real economic impact. So avoiding double counting means not counting too many visitors. The result from the World Cup, for example, is that only 1/3 of the people in a stadium are economically counting. 2/3 of the people in the stadium are residents or casuals or time switchers. But point 2 is here that we also need to count non-event days. So the visitors are there not only for this one day of the match, they are also there for 10 days traveling around in Germany, or they come to Buenos Aires for the Olympics. And then after the Olympics, they go to Patagonia and so on and spend additional money. Especially in football, we have also many people coming with the football fans. The husband has one ticket and the wife is coming with him, not having the ticket but doing some shopping. If we interview him, we have one person from Argentina who came to Germany and would calculate his consumption for 10 days. But in reality, he brought his whole family with him. 3-4 persons, which also had been there 10 days, but not attended a football match, but only, let's say, a public viewing. So often, missing aspects is that the consideration of accompanying persons is not there, that we don't calculate in the homestayers, that we don't calculate in indirect effects, and that we don't calculate in long-term payments for debts, or also those people traveling longer after the event, positive or negative way. So my last point is opportunity costs, or the big questions: are events an efficient way to invest scarce public resources? Opportunity costs is the value of the next best alternative foregone as the result of making a decision. What needs to be considered first is that only the input one system does can be spent alternatively. So when I started my presentation with the words 2 billion euros for Olympic Games, we can spend this 2 billion for something alternative, then this is a wrong thought, because 1 billion you get from the IOC. And if Buenos Aires is not getting the games, but they were given at that time to Athens, Athens gets the 1 billion. So that the alternative of 2 billions here in Buenos Aires would be that there could be spent only the 1 billion, because 1 billion was going to be given from the IOC. And this 1 billion is still not all from the city. There's a lot of money from the government and from other provinces and so on. So maybe Buenos Aires invests 300 million, but could get a 2 billion investment in case of the Olympics. So the opportunity cost is only that you can spend this 300 million alternatively. And opportunity costs are always seen from one perspective. So, for example, kindergartens are interesting for parents, or the words we should invest in hospitals, this is interesting for those being ill or looking to make people living longer. But the tourism industry certainly would say it's great to invest in our image, in tourism, to attract tourism, to construct new tourism sites, and therefore add jobs in the tourism industry. So we need to define the target system very well. And when we talk about opportunity costs, we must be fair to say, if the wish is to increase the image and we decide for Olympics, then the opportunity must be something that is also increasing the image, and we cannot compare two different things. If our aim is to increase the quality of life, then Olympics is not the right thing. Then we might better invest in hospitals to reach this target. So you see, the different perspectives means that we have different opportunity costs. I will skip this, which makes it a little complicated, and come to my conclusions regarding the opportunity costs. First of all, as I explained already, there is cross-subsidy. The city's output is partly financed by other parties. So that means we cannot just say we don't want the velodrome, but all the other venues, because you cannot win Olympic Games without having a velodrome. So this is that is linked production, actually. Linked production. We are producing something together. And therefore it is logic that something may be not efficient from one perspective. The city needs to have a velodrome. But then you have all the other positive effects. The cross-subsidy was what I said before. The IOC is investing, the state is investing, the city is investing, and all this together creates the Olympics. So you cannot only see yourself when looking at opportunity costs. Certainly there's always inefficiency. I recall to you the example I said with the velodrome. It's inefficient from an economic point of view. It's very efficient from the Cycling Federation's point of view. There are always externalities. Externalities, that means the events produces positive public goods, which lead to free rider mentality among private industries. So, for example, the tourism industry, they benefit from the better image the Olympic Games would create. But because they can use the better image without paying for it, they would not be willing to pay. So there is no private money for Olympics or something, and then the state must act if the state believes that the overall impact is a positive one, so the state acts against market failure. And last but not least, we have to consider the synergy effects. So if a city has an event strategy, that means that the first event is very expensive, the second is much cheaper. Let's look at Rio de Janeiro. They had the Pan American Games and constructed all the facilities. Now they are bidding for Olympic Games. So if they win the Olympic Games, they don't need to construct a new velodrome, they don't need to construct the new stadiums and so on, they can just use it a second time. So why can we put all the costs on the first event and not on the second event? So if you build up infrastructure for the first time, does it have to be paid off in the first time, or do you look at a longer series of events and say that is like a depreciation, we pay off for the next 20 years, and so on and so forth. So it's not so easy to say opportunity costs are high for the first games. The second games, they are not so high anymore. So my conclusion is, the quality of an economic impact analysis, or better would be a cost-benefit analysis, firstly depends on the method to evaluate the primary impact. That is the main problem. Because when we have the primary impact, we have very good models to calculate the secondary effects. The perspective, the time frame and the region, as well as the target to be met through an event, must be defined before the analysis starts. So we can not mix this later, and that explains why the analyses are so different. And my last point is, there are many methodological challenges to consider the real primary impact. The most important ones are the consideration of intangibles, the image and entertainment effect, the crowding out effect, which I skipped a little here, but it is quite complicated to calculate in those that are not coming to a region. We must avoid double counting and missing aspects, in particular the indirect effects. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you very much, Holger. Vamos a pasar a la segunda conferencia después de esta presentación, como les he dicho al comienzo, muy profunda acerca de los impactos correspondientes a los eventos deportivos, y creo yo que mejor al final podamos tener el turno de las preguntas para los dos ponentes, con lo cual si alguien tiene una pregunta quizás mejor dejarla para el final. Voy a presentar al profesor Guy Masterman, director de los estudios de Sport Management de la Northumbria University en Newcastle. He tenido el placer de estar en 2 oportunidades en su universidad, con la publicación también de 3 libros relacionados con el sponsorship, el patrocinio, The Return of the Investment, el retorno de la inversión de los patrocinios deportivos. Ha trabajado especialmente en eventos deportivos, ha trabajado en eventos musicales también, y un poco correlacionando la primera ponencia con esta segunda ponencia, evidentemente que los eventos deportivos necesitan de los patrocinadores para también generar sus ingresos y poder trabajar de una forma coordinada entre ambos. Guy, please.
Buenas noches. Thank you for having me here. That's where my Spanish finishes, I'm afraid. Anyway. Okay, the exciting subject of sponsorship, and in particular an approach that I'm taking on fit and function. The emphasis on a return on sponsorship investment has never been so significant as it is today. While sponsors have traditionally and still do resist evaluating their sponsorships, they are nevertheless beginning to critically review their sponsorship communications and are already skeptical of the values once readily credited to their sponsorships, in particular media equivalency values, which we won't go into detail on now, but they're the most common method for evaluation currently. Those credits that their sponsors are being given, they are discounting them now. At the same time, sponsors that are ready to drop out from a sponsorship activity are a threat to a sports and a wider industry that so heavily depends on sponsorship fees, services and product. So the call for more and better evaluation of sponsorship has never been so critical as it is now. This presentation tonight will not cover, though, the need for new evaluation methods for sponsorship, but will address what should be the focus for the evaluation. The unique aspects that sponsorship as a communications tool brings above all other communications tools. The development of a different approach to sponsorship evaluation, one that gets closer to demonstrating that sponsors can achieve returns on investment, will help encourage the use of more evaluation, and that indeed is also a problem. Not enough evaluation of sponsorship is going on. And the solution, for the present at least, is a multifaceted approach. Multifaceted measurement of the effect of sponsorship, so looking at sales, awareness of the brand, awareness of image, and awareness via total communications, perhaps via an integrated approach. But this is an important area of development for sponsorship evaluation. What is critical to develop, though, is a focus on the sponsorship relationship itself. In other words, what I'm getting at is not just looking at the brand in the sponsorship and looking at brand awareness or image of that brand, but looking actually at the brand with the rights owners, with the event, and looking at that whole relationship. If sponsorship is to be judged as an independent communications tool and objective measures for ROI, return on investment, is to be sought, there should be further development of these techniques. Techniques that can accurately evaluate all the aspects of critical differential that sponsorship has over other forms of communication. In other words, yes, I think sponsorship is in trouble at the moment because it can't evaluate itself properly, but that doesn't mean that when there is good sponsorship, I'm not an advocator. I agree that sponsorship is a great tool. The sponsor brand message, for example, should be contained in the link. I'm going to use this word quite a lot, the link between the sponsor and the rights owner. By measuring the effect of this link and what that has on the sponsor brand, sponsorship evaluation will edge just a little bit closer to achieving more accuracy in the extent to which sponsorship can deliver a return on investment. The link we need to address is the fit between the rights owner and sponsor. Any sponsorship opportunity has either an already established or an emerging brand image. And a critical question for any interested sponsor is whether this image and its characteristics will provide a positive or indeed a negative effect on the sponsoring brand. That's referred to as sponsorship fit. How well one is placed with the other. Do we perceive it as being something that is closely associated? And there's some theory we can refer to here. It's called schema congruity theory. Congruity, for the translator, is actually congruity's agreement, where it's close. So schema congruity theory can be used here to help explain that consumers can maintain preconceptions about individual brands. In other words, it's fixed in their mind what a brand represents. And when a sponsor associates with a sponsorship vehicle, they assess the congruency between the two. If consumers perceive that the right acceptance. So the aim for any sponsorship should therefore be based on successful fit. And research has indicated that not only would a good match enhance the image of a sponsor's brand, indeed the reverse can happen. If there's a poor match, the brand can get damaged. As the sponsor's message becomes inextricably bound up with the attributes of the sponsorship vehicle, any incongruity between the two will present a very confusing picture to those target audiences. So as far as evaluating sponsorship is concerned, the research that was based here concluded that whilst the use of demographic-based criteria to identify the mutual target markets of the sponsor and of the rights owner, there is that can be successful in the goal of increasing target market awareness or target audience awareness. The achievement of image enhancement objectives is better served by matching a sponsor and a sponsorship vehicle that have complementing image characteristics. In other words, they fit better together. The credibility of the rights owner is absolutely critical here. The profile of the rights owner is inextricably linked to the sponsorship vehicle itself, and so evaluation of them is simultaneous. For example, it's difficult to divorce David Beckham from his football boots. Indeed, it's difficult to divorce, I don't know whether you're following your British tennis, but Stella Artois, the beer, from their tennis championships in London. That's because they've been going for 27 years as a sponsor of that event, and even though they finished last year, it's still difficult to divorce Stella Artois from those championships. Those of us in tennis still refer to it as the Stella, in actual fact. So the task of identifying the credibility and ability of rights owners is naturally much easier when there is a history to examine, but more difficult when the sponsorship vehicle and all the rights owners are brand new. So if it's a new event or a new organisation owning a new event, that's much more difficult for the sponsor to assess whether or not this is a great sponsorship opportunity. So a series of unknown variables disrupts the decision-making process. But the way through to an informed decision of whether to sponsor or not is often to closely examine the individuals who will be delivering the rights themselves. So the media impact of sponsorships, event sponsorships, is often evaluated through audience reach, how many they're reaching out there in the target publics, the size of that target public, the demographics of that target public, as with conventional advertising. But what is rare is a measurement of image perception. Unfortunately, there are few studies of personality attributes for sponsorship purposes, because more trust actually appears to be placed in the use of very subjective, informed, in inverted commas, judgments. However, the value of a sponsorship fit that can result in the achievement of image-related objectives is clearly important, and so a more objective approach and considerably more use of an identification of this fit between the two parties is absolutely critical if you want to assess ROI, return on investment. For clarification here for you, an advertising message is a controlled communication. It involves a design and buying space and putting that design into that space. A sponsorship, on the other hand, is reliant on the matching of its image with that of the sponsorship vehicle. And that match is thus a critical element in its success. The sponsor, therefore, actually has a duty to consider an objective route for its decision-making and the selection of a sponsorship. And there are potential risks in doing this. And the decision to sponsor has to be a calculated one. A decision on the likely success of a sponsorship should not just concern current fit, though, at the time of selection, there are other factors. What is required is a forecast of what the image and the characteristics of the sponsorship vehicle will be throughout the lifetime of the sponsorship. In other words, it's not what it's about today. We have to know that that is a reliable sponsorship entity, a reliable rights owner into the future. So this is a difficult decision. In order to ascertain the risks, the following factors need to be considered. So, this is about negative association. A negative association where the sponsorship vehicle might become a poor fit in terms of its image and characteristics. This might involve poor performance. It might be an association with losing. Losing, not just losing a losing individual, but a losing, failing group, a failing organisation, a failing event. It might be a sports person losing a match. It might be an event losing money. It might be an association losing respect, or even a public sector body losing support. But that's not to say that losing per se is necessarily going to cause a negative association. It depends on the objectives of the sponsorship and the nature of the fit. So, take Volvo for interest's sake. Volvo, the car manufacturer, invested £30 million for a 4-year deal to sponsor the Volvo Round the World Yacht Race. And when one leg of that race got into difficulties in 2006, Volvo itself was forced to enact various forms of fresh communications. They had to think very quickly about new PR messages to counteract the negative associations that failing boats, boats that were sinking, sailors that were being rescued from boats, what that negative association had on Volvo. So Volvo positioned itself as a manufacturer, of course, regularly as reliable and safe cars. You know, they're the cars, and forgive me if any of you are Volvo owners, but you're very safe people. You know, you go around with lights on all the time. You've got cushions and airbags all over the place. It's like a cockpit of an aeroplane. So they look after you, do Volvo, so they can't afford a negative association of a boat sinking. So what they had to do was, because the UK's media in 2006 got right on their case, said, aha, Volvo, what's the sense? Where's the fit here between a safe car and a failing boat race? So the UK's media director for Volvo had to talk about, and these were the themes of the PR mechanics involved, the talk was about how tough and how strong the boats really were to have survived all those difficulties despite having rescues, etc. So negative association can also concern other factors, particularly away from the actual field of play. So that's why I say it's not necessarily just about losing on a field of play. There's also antisocial behaviour that results in bad publicity, for example. And I was associated for my sins with a footballer who did, and I won't give you the details of what he did, but it was pretty bad enough. It was off the field of play. He was an England centre forward. He'd scored goals for England. A guy called Stan Collymore. And we'd arranged his sponsorship with Reebok UK. So when this incident happened and the media caught it, and it was in the papers the next day, Reebok UK called us, the agents, and of course wanted to disassociate with their sponsored client. And we, as the managers of that, had to make best do. And of course it's written in the contract, they can do that. But they saw that that was a negative association on the Reebok UK brand. But hey, what about Alan Everson? Alan Everson carries a gun, or did do, carried a gun in the glove compartment, and presumably not a Volvo, maybe a Hummer. He carries a gun and gets arrested, but Reebok US decide, hang on, this is the edge we want for the brand. So similar sort of cases in one side of the Atlantic, negative, but on the other side, used positively. Sponsorship clutter is the excessive number of other messages that interfere with the message of the sponsor and lead to the perception of a thing we call over-commercialization. In other words, the sponsor and the brand are seen to be just advertising, just pumping us with information. So you can see where I'm coming from here. This isn't about a good fit. This isn't about a good association between the two. And events can display too many advertising hoardings around the outside, for example. You know, literally, a sponsorship vehicle that is a motor car can have a lot of messages on it. And when that's whizzing round, and even when the snappers get it for a static photograph in a magazine, we have difficulty in actually forcing our way through the clutter to get the message from that any one sponsor. The way in which advertising can also impact on the ambience of an event is also an important consideration. Look at tennis. Wimbledon. Wimbledon's coming up in a few weeks' time. Look at the difference between Wimbledon and its approach on court and sponsorship and the Roland Garros French Open, which is going on right now. If you go, if you're not at the conference tomorrow, watch the event tomorrow or back on recorded replay tonight and look at how many sponsors Roland Garros has. At least, yes, it puts up the brand in black and green and everything's in black and green colourways. But there are a lot of messages there. That's in contrast with a Wimbledon that just has a clock, Rolex, an umpire's chair, Dunlop Slazenger, a few drinks around the place. Robinson's has been there for years. Over-commodification also occurs via other media. Websites, public relations activity can become overladen with from the customer's perspective. Too many messages from the sponsors involved. The danger is that this might involve too many messages that prevent or interfere with recognition or recall, and of course detract from the success of the fit. An over-commercialized event can be perceived as exactly that by audiences, with only negative impacts of the fit of any of its sponsors. Another factor, ambush marketing, and it's getting bigger. The risk of being ambushed is getting higher as a sponsor. There are sponsors that have decided to drop their sponsorships and adopt other marketing tactics that are directed actually at the event they used to sponsor. So take Pringles. Do you know Pringles? Yeah? Crisps, snacks, chips. Okay, Pringles, a former UEFA European Championship sponsor, did not renew for 2004. But instead conducted ambush tactics at the same event. I won't go into the details, I don't think there's enough time. But they used footballers on the front of the pack and they dressed them in similar colours to what they would have played in if they were playing for a national team. So Ruud van Nistelrooy playing for Holland in an orange strip. But there was nothing illegal in it because the orange strip was just a slightly different orange from the orange that Holland play in. Clever. And it cost them $1 million. That's 30 times less, perhaps, than what it might have cost them to do the UEFA Championships again. So this is a danger, isn't it, for events? What ambush tactics, of course, cannot emulate, though, is a sponsorship. They can't emulate sponsorship fit, because if they're not the sponsor, they aren't able to get that fit. So it's incumbent, it's the responsibility of a sponsor, if they want to gain that competitive advantage, is to make the most of it, which I'm going to allude to. But it brings me in, oh, by the way, if I've got a little bit of time, this corner here, any of you familiar with a guy called Lai Ning? He's a gymnast. He won a lot of gold medals for China. Lai Ning has a very big company. As you can see in this corner here, his slogan for his company is the exact opposite of what Adidas's is. So Adidas is nothing is impossible, I believe, whereas Lai Ning's is anything is possible. And Adidas is just down the street. That's one end of the street, and that's the middle of the street. In Beijing, during the Olympics, Adidas are the sponsor. Lai Ning, in fact, are ambushing. And Lai Ning is the guy that ran round and lit the torch. What do you think Adidas were thinking about that? Because the IOC must have been pretty furious that Beijing and Bokov decided to have a guy who isn't a sponsor, who heads up a company, running around their stadium and lighting the torch in a very dramatic effect. Biggest ambush I've seen yet. Okay, it leads me into my main point, really, and it's about this thing, sponsorship function. Clearly, the strength of the fit is critical and can be the differential required by the sponsor to gain the competitive advantage it needs. It can gain that by taking out the sponsorship. This is where function comes in. A sponsor's requirements, in other words, its objectives for taking the sponsorship out in the first place, may not be so easily met, and in order for a sponsor to finally agree to do that sponsorship, the rights owner that's selling them that sponsorship may well have to come up with fresh, new assets and provide the fit. Make sure it provides the fit. So I'm definitely advocating that every single negotiation for a sponsor is absolutely unique. This is where function can provide the key to ensuring that a sponsorship is bespoke, it's tailored, it's unique. In other words, it's designed to achieve that sponsorship for meeting those objectives of that brand. So what you do if you're selling a sponsorship is not actually to go with it in a proposal and say, there you are, fit your square peg into my round hole. What you do is you leave that and you go and you find out what they want. Come back, come away and design something that meets their needs. It sounds simple, but believe it or not, it's not happening. Not happening enough, at least. Whilst any of the event assets may be bundled together to form a tailored set of rights in this approach, it's the inclusion of rights that are intrinsically functional to the sponsor that will make a sponsorship unique. For the closest of fits, the sponsor, its image or its brand, need to be incorporated into the sponsorship. In other words, get the sponsor into the event. Get the brands, the products of the sponsor into the event so that they are seen to provide a function whereby the event cannot function without them. It's not always possible, though, because it's all very well to say that, but it's not always possible to come up with that key function. It might be easy to understand a car providing the efficient transport, but there are others that make it more difficult. So some functions are more easily identified than others. So for example, the flowers presented by, and there they are, they're the flowers. They're part of the prize. The balls were supplied by. The energy drink is courtesy of. And the energy drink is put into the footballer's hands on the side. Did you know that it may not be Gatorade in that bottle? It may be just water, because water's probably better for you. But actually, the bottle says Gatorade. Other functions may prove more difficult to identify, and when put into practice, may appear convoluted. What do I mean by convolution? Again, for translation purposes, made up, seen to be a bit in pretense, seen to be not quite true. Indeed, the greater the creativity in the function, the greater the need for careful attention to this, so that the function doesn't appear too convoluted. In fact, a good fit is where there is no convolution. But sometimes as event managers, we have to think about what is it that we can get that sponsor involved with. As convoluted as it may first appear, Lansong champagne. We all love it, don't we, champagne? We drink champagne when we're successful. At Wimbledon, Lansong champagne, you cannot have your strawberries and cream if you don't have a glass of champagne alongside it. Now, actually, think about it. A lot of people go to Wimbledon, yes, to watch tennis, of course, but some of them go there for the social occasion. They go there to have the strawberries and the cream and the champagne. So Lansong champagne are a function that's necessary for the success of the event. Look at Mom Champagne. Mom Champagne previously supplied the winners' podiums with bottles of champagne in Formula One motor racing. Put the drinking aside, and yes, he may have a sip of that after he's not doing very well this year, but we still have got a Brit up there, haven't we? Yeah, 6 races on the trot. But the drinking aside, victory spraying is part of the event. What would a Formula One Monte Carlo race from this last Sunday be if Jenson Button hadn't sprayed the crowd with the champagne? It's got nothing to do with drinking. Function. Technology is key. Technology now, of course, is also a great opportunity. So take ship-to-shore technology on boats. Boats are out there in the middle of the ocean and they need to be in contact. So a company like SAP, one of the biggest suppliers of IT around the world, if they put SAP equipment onto that boat, not only is it a function of keeping in contact and also keeping the media in contact, it's life-saving. Now, life-saving technology as a function is a whole new concept. But what has to happen, of course, is how many of us know that SAP is on the boat? So SAP has to leverage, activate, exploit, they all mean the same thing, with more promotions to make sure we all know that SAP is on the boat. So you can't just sponsor, you've got to spend more to exploit that sponsorship. You've got to take the competitive advantage and make it sustainable. Technologies such as Samsung or Swatch, they're providing things like Wireless Olympic Works, WOW, W-O-W, and the official timing, respectively, those two companies. So Samsung supplied much needed information services via the handheld devices that it gave to event officials, staff and media. So by putting the actual Palm Pilot that they make into the media's hands, with information of scores, results, etc., not only is the event a better event, because actually, in fact, Swatch provided a one-stop shop for all communications of scores, whereby previously, prior to the 2004 Olympics, it was provided by lots of different suppliers. Swatch, in doing that, in putting this stuff into the media's hands, it's actually saying, hey, look how good this technology is, and it's ours, it's Samsung's, it's Swatch's. And if the media are served, they will write better things about it. It's simple, isn't it? A more unusual example is actually provided by Motorola. Motorola thought that $2.4 million for a 30-second slot at the 39th Super Bowl in Jacksonville was far too much money. So they turned to event experiences. And they actually got pairs of people at the event to actually take part in an obstacle race. One person is sat up on a stage and he's got the Motorola headset and a mobile phone from NFL. You know the connection, the headsets. And the other guy is going around the obstacles blindfolded. But the only way he can get around the obstacles is actually on the phone. So you put the phone. In fact, research also shows that the effectiveness of sponsorship is directly related to the degree to which you exploit your rights. So the key to exploitation is the leveraging of the functions sponsors have within their sponsorship. In other words, sponsors telling publics what they are doing and showing them, actually getting their stuff into their site or even into their hands. Right, we've done some research. So we're just starting out this. I'm a visiting professor at Shanghai Sport University, and my university, via me, with SUS, is collaborating on initiating a new way to look at sponsorship evaluation by focusing on, let's have a measurement of function. So we took some data, 283 respondents or so, and we collected quite a range of data, but what we were really interested in was actually what each of those 283 thought a number of sponsors were doing, what they were providing at the event. So we took 6 of those sponsors. We took Mercedes, who were the principal sponsor. There was in fact some complication in how they were referred to, which actually was good research because it will indicate that they shouldn't call them principal, signature and premier sponsors, because some thought that the premier sponsors at the 3rd tier level were higher than the upper level. But anyway, that's another lesson to be learned. Mercedes were there. Mercedes provided the official player VIP transport, and of course they told their publics that on the sides of the cars and the decals. They also got a Mercedes car, first time I've seen it in tennis. They drove a Mercedes car onto the court, engine running, handed the keys over to Djorkaeff, sorry, he's a footballer, I can't pronounce his name, the guy who won it, who was actually number 3 in the world at the time, handed him the keys and sat him in it, and he hadn't even received his trophy yet. That's very simple, but actually the Mercedes was a prize. It was a function. Rolex, of course, on court, just like Mercedes are here. Mercedes are on the net, etc. Rolex, timing on the court. And Rolex also did something interesting. They used one sponsorship to exploit the other. So their year-round sponsorship of Roger Federer. You've seen the adverts in the magazines wearing his Rolex. Roger Federer is massively important as a tennis player in China. Very, very popular. So him playing at the event, despite him not winning it, that sponsorship actually is exploiting the event sponsorship, and vice versa. Clever stuff. The other sponsors we looked at were China Mobile, CPIC, an insurance company, Citibank, and Sony Ericsson. So we asked a number of questions, but we focused on function, and that's just what I want to relate to you now, just to sort of round things off a bit. Their function seemed to go with importance at the event. Here's some of the data. I refer to some of these individual tables individually. So don't worry if you can't quite see it. A sponsor, particularly at an event with this kind of profile, pays a fee, and that in itself is a function. A function that was recognised in the responses by the respondents. Not surprisingly, brand awareness was also recognised by respondents. They said, yes, that sponsor is getting involved in that event just to gain brand awareness. They also saw that Mercedes were helping out tennis, helping out sport, helping out the city of Shanghai. Now, whilst that didn't figure very highly, it wasn't that significant, it's still interesting that people were recognising that that was a role that sponsors might or might not play. It can be seen from just one sponsor, Citigroup, this was the rogue in the group of 6, that a correct identification of function was lower. So their function as an event banker was lower than perhaps some of the other reasons for being a function. But the other 5 were just the opposite. For CPIC, for China Mobile, this is quite significant. The results for Citibank, though, of course, might be a little more easy to understand when we don't really perhaps perceive that an event needs a bank. But of course, it does need to bank its money. For the others, though, the functions are a bit more demonstrable. As you can see, the bottom line is about function. It's figuring more highly for each of those companies. And for Mercedes, And Rolex, for example, the rights include courtesy cars, show cars on site, competitions with cars full of tennis balls, so on and so forth. So they activated quite a lot on site. And what this research indicates is that a function is a ready-made vehicle that can provide a focus for sponsor-produced promotions. It must have had some effect on those respondents, because these were qualitative questions. We didn't pre-prompt them, pre-make them aware of anything. We just asked them, what do you see Mercedes' role played at the event? And these were the grouped answers. The results may also allude to a premise that the clearer the function, the easier it is to promote, and the greater the opportunity there is to show that a sponsor has to demonstrate good fit in the perceptions of its target audiences. However, the degree to which this success can be achieved as a result of this is not quite clear, so it's worthy of further research, and that's what we're doing. A resulting recommendation, though, for both sponsors and rights owners is clear, and credible function within sponsorships is clearly an important factor. Myself and SUS, we're going to be continuing this method of inquiry. We're going to stick with tennis, but we're also going to widen it and look at individual brands rather than 6 at a time to get a little bit deeper into this. So maybe I will have the opportunity and privilege to talk to you again in the future about how this is working out. It should be possible for a rights owner to derive unique and functional rights if sufficient information is being collected from the potential sponsor. Remember the approach in the first place? Go listen to what they want and then go and make sure you supply that in your solution. A successful sponsorship relationship between a brand and an event, organisation or an individual can lead to a positive perceptual change for that brand. In order to achieve this positive brand perception, sponsors need to be absolutely explicit. In other words, you need to put the product into the event, the brand into the event, but then tell people what you're doing. It has to have credible meaning. It also has to communicate this so that target audiences can see it clearly and understand the connection that has been made. Because remember, the sap on the boat, if you don't tell them, if they don't see clearly, if they don't know that it's life-saving, if you don't use that function as the central part of the exploitation of the sponsorship, then you will fail. You need to take it that one stage further. So audiences must be able to make the connection between the sponsor and what it's sponsoring in order to make sense of it. And when the connection is not so explicit, then the sponsor has to inform its audiences of what meaning and connection there actually is there. So sponsors and rights owners should derive unique and functional rights for better exploitation opportunities and greater target perception of that beneficial fit. Increase your exploitation and that will give you an increased success, or at least an increased chance of a better sponsorship relationship. Mucho gracias.